So welcome viewers, and welcome Kristen Fountain.
Thank you.
You are the Interim Coordinator of the Vermont Journalism Coalition. And as I read about you, you've been a reporter in Vermont for more than 20 years. Tell us a little bit about where you have been and what brought you to the field of journalism.
Yeah, for sure. I moved to Vermont to work as a journalist in 2004. I was a municipal reporter for the Valley News, covering Hartford at first, White River Junction area and beyond. And I was there about 5 years. And I worked also for the Stowe Reporter Waterbury Record for several years, mostly covering Waterbury when the 2011 flooding occurred, and the rebuilding after that was when I was there, and it was very interesting and felt really important to be a local reporter at that time. And then most recently I was at VT Jigger, both as a healthcare reporter and then a senior editor working with our reporters. So a lot of different types of news organizations, which made this job an interesting one to me, right? Because it was like sort of the traditional daily newspaper and then the weekly and then the digital only nonprofit. So we have a really wide range of different entities active in the state. So
yeah, and you've been involved in them. How did you come to reporting? What's your background in what?
Yeah, I guess I've always liked to write, and I've always been very interested in politics and in how government functions and how people work together and how organizations develop. And so it was a pretty natural fit to me once I realized that's what the job was writing about those things mostly. So I went to college, and I actually went to grad school in philosophy for a few years, but I decided I didn't want to be an academic. And so journalism was my next move.
Yeah, is there a link? Is there a natural link between philosophy and journalism? There seems to be between something like anthropology and journalism.
I think they both require sort of critical thinking skills, right? Sort of breaking down a situation or trying to break down a situation and a problem into its parts and understanding the universe of what you're looking at. But I mean, they're also both very sort of general frameworks for trying to understand the world, I guess.
Yeah.
But probably not beyond that. I don't know.
For folks who aren't, for folks who haven't really thought about it, maybe just a basic, what is a journalist? What's the importance of journalism, and what's the importance of a journalist to you? And you could put it in the in context of this time as we see the Washington Post sort of folding and conversations about local news and information deserts and shifting and changing of how people are getting information. Is The Daily Show? Is Jon Stewart a journalist? Talk a little bit about who's a journalist. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, to me, journalism is primarily sort of a methodology and a framework for gathering information. And it involves basically speaking to people, primarily in my mind, about their perceptions of what is happening, and then also looking at sort of primary sources in the form of documents. But I think the idea is to try to seek as many different points of view that appear to be part of the truth, and then as simply as possible explain how these different pieces fit together. Mm-hmm. I think the idea is also just checking with as many different sources, people, documents, video, to make sure that, when you have a sentence, I mean, this maybe is where philosophy fits in, is, if I write a sentence and I'm fact checking it, I'll check like, well, okay, what am I saying in this sentence, and who did I talk to that's backing this up, and And that, to me, is what journalism is having sources backing up everything that you say, that you trust.
So you've just recently been appointed as the Interim Coordinator for the Vermont Journalism Coalition. Can you tell us a little bit about what this coalition is?
Yes. So the general concept of the coalition is basically that in this current media environment, it is important that all types of news media have a forum for working together, basically. And, we have digital outlets doing podcasts, and we have radio doing digital news, and we have, TV writing stories. I mean, the medium is much less central. So in Vermont, we've historically had a press association that was very newspaper focused, and we have a still very active broadcasting association, and both important organizations. But this was meant to be a place where we could all speak together and work towards sort of common and collaborative goals. And to be honest, it was also formed at a moment where it felt like many of our essential small local news options just could use additional support that might come from collaborating.
Yeah, and this was funded by Press Forward and the Vermont Community Foundation, and is also a way of seeing some of that national funding come into the state. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think my understanding of the Vermont Press Forward chapter is more that they are gathering Vermont philanthropy towards this goal, rather than sort of they're joining the national movement and bringing Vermont dollars towards that.
Got it. It's not dollars coming in from outside Vermont, I understand, yeah. And one of the things that they did recently is the Vermont News and Information Ecosystem Report.
That's right.
Over a year or two of data collection from around the state. So talk a little bit about, if you're forming the Vermont Journalism Coalition as a way of having these disparate information and news or journalist associate folks work together. What is the report telling us that you need to be, what are you learning from that report where we need to put our energy and attention?
Yeah, I think what was most interesting to me, just because I think having worked in journalism, for several decades, like the sort of findings about the state of Vermont media were not surprising, and I'd love to talk about those findings more. But to me, what was interesting about this report was putting Vermont in the context of other places that these same consultants had done similar reports. And their analysis was that comparatively, by a large margin, Vermont has many more media outlets per person still, and also many more locally owned. And I don't think that's a coincidence, but 80% of all our media, news media in Vermont is owned locally, whether it's private or nonprofit or what have you. And the diversity of types of media is high. And also in their surveys of people are more satisfied with their local news. They trust it more still. They value it more than in other places. So I think there was a lot of good news there, in a sense, that we haven't lost as much ground in terms of our media ecosystem as other states, which, I guess I somewhat knew that, but it was interesting to see.
Data. Yeah. Talk about a little bit more, were there other surprises or highlights that came out of that help determine where you're going to put your efforts?
Yeah. To me, the biggest highlight and that really aligns with where I'm focusing is just that we do have a fairly healthy, diverse ecosystem of news outlets, but they are individually quite fragile, right? That many of our local news outlets are run by one or two people on very small budgets. And, you know, if someone is in a car accident, if someone has to take care of a family member, like there just is there's not much backup there. There's not many of them, you know, we've just been very lucky, I think, in Vermont. We've had these amazing individuals or families that have really felt it part of their mission and meaning in life to provide journalism to their local communities. And those people, some of them are nearing retirement. You know, who is going to take the place? How are we going to sustain those organizations?
Are you thinking mainly, and here you're thinking mainly about print journalism, I'm guessing?
I'm thinking about print journalism because that is kind of where as you know, there's community media and your access network that is in different parts of the state. But, you know, we have our commercial television stations, which are very active, and we have our, you know, Vermont Public, and we have, you know, some, you know, VT Digger
local radio.
And local radio. Yeah. But in terms of like who is at the very small select board meeting regularly, it's these small newspapers that, you know, are pretty much a solo or a duo act often.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me is the prevalence of Front Porch Forum as an information purveyor and named specifically in the report as a resource.
Sure.
And then sort of the lack of inclusion of this more nebulous social media world where people are getting information. Is it, you know, are you including things like Burlington Buzz, or are you including influencers who are, you know, telling
They did include Burlington Buzz,
yeah,
and there were a couple other
Yep.
sort of hyper local. I think their methodology, their take on it, had similarly to do with some of those editorial choices, that kind of journalistic kind of editing down of information, presentation, mediation.
Yep.
And so I think they're all part of the same environment and they're all a piece of it. But one might be information, the other might be news. You know, I don't know how you want to distinguish, and there's obviously a continuum, right? But I think Front Porch Forum has been really important to a lot of communities. I don't think you can count on the information there having been fact-checked, you know, by a professional journalist. So that's the difference.
Yeah, yeah. That, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about that and the role of journalism in not only providing factual information, but providing a home for community, right? So, and that could be community media, could be the local newspaper. You know, my mom, I was just talking with her, she grew up in Brattleboro. She said, you know, we used to look at the Brattleboro Reformer to see who was coming home from college, so we would know who was going to be at the party. And that's sort of like super hyper local information that you would now get from social media.
Right.
You're like, who's coming home from college for the weekend? You're going to get on Instagram, right? Or Snapchat. So talk a little bit just philosophically about the role of journalism and local media in building community, bringing people together, helping build ties that bind us.
Yeah, I think communities are built out of stories. They're built out of understanding each other's histories and experiences. So I think the best kind of local media is able to capture that. And it's not just exactly about what happened at this meeting, although that's very important. But you also want to share the celebrations and the struggles and the sports teams. And, I think the challenge that the loss of sort of the traditional business model for local media has been just kind of having to really narrow focus to such a degree that we can't cover that vast diversity of things as well as has been done in the past. So trying to figure out how do we do it as well as we possibly can, right?
And is that part of the efforts? Is that something that you're thinking about in terms of the coalition, is helping build connections with folks?
Yeah.
You mentioned the business model. Is that something that the coalition would be offering, is some alternative business models for?
I think what we can help with is, I think increasingly there is a recognition that there are many parts of a small newspaper's business that might be more efficient if shared across a number of them. And so trying to figure out what's possible. I think some places have systems that are working well, and obviously you don't want to mess those up or change, if it's not broken. Yeah. But maybe they have excess capacity that someone, in the same county or across the state, if they're struggling, they could utilize. I think there's also just an increasing recognition that people may not individually be able to pay for news or be in that mode anymore, but that there is community interest in supporting local news through, donations. And so we can help support that by offering a tax-exempt way of donating, say, to your local newspaper.
And that's specifically Vermont Journalism Coalition.
Yes.
Will become a 501c3 that can take in funds and
Yeah.
distribute those to local papers
Yes,
or
and
local news outlets.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And there's certainly already some outlets that are making that jump into either creating their own sort of affiliated 501, not affiliated, I guess, but sort of supporting a regional 501c3 that would support all kinds of news and information and journalism in that region.
Yep.
So, part of what I'm doing now is sort of trying to survey the landscape and say, okay, well, what efforts are already underway? What are the needs? How do we support what's happening? We're sort of jumping into this in the middle of a lot of processes. So
Yeah. Well, and as you brought up one of the things from this report, and I'm just going to repeat what the name of is, the Vermont News and Information Ecosystem Report for folks who want to take a look at it, is...
You can find it on the Vermont Community Foundation Press Forward section of their website. Yeah.
We're not necessarily in the role, or you're not necessarily in the role of how do we keep us surviving, right? We potentially can talk about how do we make this ecosystem, for lack of a better word, thrive, to work together. Yes, no, true?
Yeah, I think we want to be able to, the way I am thinking about it is we want to provide a backstop, a backbench, some capacity for these very small outlets that are among our membership, so that, you know, if they need help with whatever piece of their business, whether it's editorial or bookkeeping or whatever, that we can help them access those resources, whether it's on like a temporary basis or a long-standing basis. So it's trying to create a collaboration that makes us all more resilient.
Yeah.
If
And
that
currently you
makes
have
sense.
42 members
Yeah.
from around the state.
Yeah.
And those are members who have at least one full-time journalist
That's right. Full-time paid professional journalist
on
Yep.
staff.
Yep.
And then you're opening that, you're looking for more members.
Yes, there are at least probably maybe up to 10 additional publications that would be eligible, or outlets of different kinds, or more even. And then we are open to what we're calling affiliate members that may like sort of share similar goals but don't maybe have someone paid on staff. Like there are some sort of town volunteer-based newsletters that I think are still doing, you know, important work that, you know, we'd love to also be able to support, but, you know, they may not meet the strict standard of the voting membership. So we have other options.
Great. Is there anything more that you want to add right now? Just this is an introduction of you to the community and this project. Can people learn more about it?
Yeah, well, so we do have a website. It's vermontjournalism.com, and we will be continuing to develop who we are and what we do. I think we're a very new organization, and all of these processes take time.
And you're part-time.
And I'm
Interim
part-time right
Coordinator.
now. Yes, yeah. So this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a huge shift in the economics of news, and we're not going to turn that back, you know. But I think it's very clear that working together, we can help each other more than we are now.
Yeah.
So that is my modest goal.
That's sort of, I was going to say, what's your thing that wakes you up? What's the thing that gets you up in the morning to keep going?
Well, I would love to have there be a structure in place such that when one of these heroic local news producers is ready to retire, that there is some obvious next steps. Like there are, you know, if there isn't somebody waiting in the wings in their organization, there's a way to find that person, or there's a way to pass that piece of community infrastructure on to the next person in some form, you know, and to hold it in trust in some way, because that it is these are essential parts of communities, and we need to be able to allow them to continue, you know, past just one person. They have to have, we have to have some way to allow that to happen. I just think where I live, you know, the Hardwick Gazette recently went through a change where, you know, its longtime owner was retiring. He put out this nationwide call for someone to come purchase it, or there was a contest to see, and someone did come forward and did it for a few years, but then they needed to pass it on, and now it's being run by a new nonprofit that was set up, right? So I would hope the coalition could support those kinds of transitions so that people aren't just starting fresh, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Great. Kristen, thank you for coming in. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking up this work, and it'll be interesting to see how it grows in the coming years.
I'll be interested too.
All right. Thank you all for watching.